Cheers. Welcome to Miss Imani B's classroom. I'm Miss Imani, or Miss B, or Miss Imani B, and this is Tea with Miss B. I'm so excited to have you here today because today we are speaking with two phenomenal women who are not only just phenomenal women, but amazing home educators. They both homeschool their children, and today they are talking with me, sharing some of their insights, opinions, histories about homeschooling. This episode is for anyone who's been interested in homeschooling, who has considered homeschooling their children, who are currently homeschooling their children. I hope that it gives you great insight and inspiration as it did me. Have a great one. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tea with Miss B. I'm Miss B, and today I have two very special guests with me. If you all would please introduce yourselves.
Okay, I'll go first. My name is Jania Otey, and would you like us to tell you about our family or?
Sure.
Okay. I have two boys. One will be 15 in October, and he is in the 10th grade. And I have a 12-year-old who is in the 7th grade. And we live in Alabama. Used to live in Washington, D.C. for 21 years, but we are in Alabama now.
All right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Jamia, not to be confused with Jania. I'm Eaton, and I have four children. My oldest is 16. She's a senior this year. And then I have a 11-year-old, and then I have 8-year-old twins. And we have been homeschooling for about, I think we're going on our 12th year.
Okay, so that actually gets into my first question. Today, everyone, we're talking all about homeschooling. As you know, I am a second grade teacher. I've been teaching for about 7 years, but I have not homeschooled. And with what's going on with Corona and everything, a lot of families have been reaching out. So I decided that I would reach out and talk to two wonderful moms and homeschool teachers that I admire and respect. So my first question for the both of you, and you can decide who wants to start. And since Jamia actually kind of answered this, Janae, we're going to start with you. How long have you been homeschooling?
Sure. So I've actually home educated my boys since birth. They've never attended a traditional school setting. I mean, they've been home with me since they were born. And my oldest was ready to actually sit down and start having school when he was 3. I mean, he was kind of ready at 2, but he was ready to really sit down at 3. We had a little play school table and the chairs and, you know, the whole setup. He was all for it and excited about learning.
Wonderful.
So I'm sorry. So quantitatively, that would be, I'm going on 15 years.
Okay. And Jamia, could you repeat again how long you've been homeschooling?
Sure. So mine is a little different with our firstborn. She did go to traditional school she went for pre-K and kindergarten. We relocated from D.C. to Maryland, and she has one of those late birthdays. So she was already reading, probably on a 2nd or 3rd grade level, and they wanted to put her back into kindergarten. And I couldn't have that. So we tried it for a year when it doesn't really count at kindergarten level. We did great. It was exciting. I had her reaching milestones fairly quickly, but in my mind, it was temporary. So I sent her back to school after that year was over, thinking that she could go into the 2nd grade, but now they wouldn't let her test in to the 2nd grade. So she did go through the 1st grade, and after the 1st grade, we pulled her out, and then we homeschooled her to the end, and then the other ones came along, and they just fell in line with homeschooling.
So then my follow-up question would be either why did you decide to homeschool, or why did you decide to keep homeschooling? Because I can see like both of you have more than one child. So why keep up with it?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. My initial thought when I had this child was not to homeschool. I think like most parents, I was thinking, okay, I have this child, I love him. And when it was time for me to start researching schools that he would attend, that's what kind of triggered my mind to look at homeschooling. Like I said, we lived in D.C. for Washington, D.C. for 21 years. So I did research the schools in the area, and I had visited several of the schools when I was in college. So I knew what some of the environments were like. And then when I researched some of the schools just right in our neighborhood, I really was not happy with what I was seeing in terms of the test scores. And I was familiar with some of the environments, meaning some of the activity that takes place in some of the public schools and the negative influences of some of the children and teachers, to be honest. And then I just started researching, what were some other options. And I ended up connecting with several members of our church, members of the church that homeschool. And I started connecting with moms in the DC area that home educate their children. And I talked to my husband about it, and it was just a natural fit. Now, why we continue to homeschool, I would say there are several reasons, and this might take a little bit longer. But number one, I enjoy having my children with me and being able to watch them grow and develop in terms of their education. But initially, I just didn't like what I was seeing in terms of the research that I was finding regarding the test scores and things in schools. And I do not believe that test scores are indicative of a child's education, but at first glance, when you're looking, for really good programs, that's something that you're going to consider. Another aspect or another thing I considered was just the influence of other people, other children, and negative influences. And I was concerned about that. I wanted to make sure that I had a prominent role in, helping my children even decide who they were going to befriend, what type of things that they may be exposed to. And it's a little more difficult to do that when you're in a traditional public school setting. And then the other reason is I wanted to be able to accelerate my children through subject areas and topics and things that they would grasp quickly. And I didn't want them to be stuck or to kind of have to wait until the class moved on to the next objective or the next lesson. And then I also wanted to be able to slow down in subject areas where they, may need more help. And so when you home educate, you're able to do all of that. And similar to Jamia, what she shared, when my oldest had completed kindergarten, I actually looked to enroll him in a public charter online program where he's still considered enrolled in a public charter school, but they would send me all the materials and I would do all the schooling at home. And because he had the late birthday as well, we were told that he would have to start kindergarten all over again. I didn't like that idea, but I wanted some more structure. So I went ahead and enrolled him. And here's where the acceleration piece comes in. He actually completed kindergarten and first grade in 1 year. So I was able to through quickly those things and concepts and areas that I knew that he had mastered. And then I was able to fill in the gaps if there was something that we were lacking along the way.
Jamia, would you like to add anything?
Sure. Can you remind me what the question was again?
So the question was either why did you decide to homeschool or why did you continue to homeschool?
Okay, sure. So if I'm honest, initially, I had no intention of homeschooling. I had a career going on, and I kind of wanted to keep doing that. And Sinai was in a good school. Our oldest was in a good school that Omar and I, my husband and I, were very pleased with, and I was very active in the school. And so all of those together, I had no idea that I even wanted to homeschool. So then fast forward when we moved to Maryland and the school would not allow me to be as active there as I would like to be. So therefore I couldn't even get to know the kids. I couldn't get to know the teacher. We could go to PTA and things like that and get to know the teacher that way, but it wasn't enough for me to kind of get to know the teacher and the influence that they would have on her. And then on top of that, she would take the school bus home. And you know, on the school bus, there were some expletives written on the seats, and she could read. So she came home one day with some language that I'm so thankful that she went to her father, because I don't know how to be poker faced with things like that. And he handled it beautifully. And then I was like, she read that on the bus. So that was kind of strike one. And then in school, we were just having some concerns with her finishing her work so quickly, because it was easy for her and she was repeating a lot of concepts that she already knew. Then she would start to talk to her friends. So then now she was labeled a chatterbox and she was getting in trouble. And so when we would have the parent-teacher conferences, and I brought this big binder of her work from the year before, and I think I may have intimidated her first year teacher. Like, look, this is the level of work I'm used to her doing, and I can see her rushing through her work now. Her handwriting was poor, and it was difficult and challenging to go through that year. And then the last straw was, you know, they have specials where they go to on Tuesdays and Thursdays after school. And so the school that she was attending, they hadn't quite figured out a really solid way for transition when substitutes are there. So the substitutes didn't really know the drill. And on the days that she had specials, I had to pick her up from school. She was not to get on the school bus. So one particular day, she's supposed to stay after for Spanish. She calls me from some stranger's house, and she was like, "Oh, mommy, I forgot that I was supposed to stay after today." I said, "Wait a minute, where are you calling me from?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm at the lady's house from the bus stop." So she's at some random stranger's house calling me, where there were a lot of checks and balances that were missed that she got on the bus. And I said, "Oh, this is like a huge problem." And so we go to this conference every year where I'm able to really talk to a lot of homeschool families, and I was gathering information and researching, and we pulled her out from that conference, and then we just started homeschooling from second grade on. And now with the other three that came along, a lot of family and friends assumed that when the twins came, they were like, "Surely you're gonna put those kids in school." And I said, "No, this is life experience. I mean, school is not just about academics. It's also about how do we adjust to life situations. It's conflict resolution. It's learning how to just adapt to situations." So it changed, right, when the twins came back those first few years, but it was still education, and we continued, and we just haven't looked back.
Thank you. So in addition to like helping your children advance, keeping them in a safe area or in a safe space, there is a stereotype going on about like children who are homeschooled, who have home education, about like when they get to college or when they get to high school, they don't know how to socialize with students or children their own age. They don't know what's going on in the world. Like, what do you all do to ensure that your children have strong social lives and that they're able to socialize with other children their age?
I think that's a common question that people have when it comes to talking about homeschool. My boys have always been very social. I mean, I just remember when they were young and were, you know, at the playground around the corner from on New Hampshire Avenue, you know, they'll just walk another 3, 4, 5-year-old, 6-year-old and just start talking to them, because, you know, kids learn certain behaviors that aren't good, you know, from people that they interact with, and sometimes even their own parents. But in terms of social, my boys have never had an issue with that. We also, you know, are very intentional, just like most parents. You want your children to be involved in other activities outside of school, particularly if your school doesn't provide certain activities. So our boys have always participated in various extracurricular activities, kung fu, you know, soccer, different science co-ops. We're very active in our church and, you know, participating in activities with the youth and going to youth conferences. So you provide opportunity for children to participate in other activities, and usually through those activities, they will gain, you know, they'll have some friends. They'll make friends with people, And then you're just kind of intentional about the families that you befriend, you know, and who the parents become friends with. And usually, you know, you'll get together for play dates and you get to know the parents, you get to know the children. So I think generally just through, you know, extracurricular activities, our children they get plenty of social. And I think the difference is we can kind of have some control over who they socialize with. I mean, obviously we don't know everyone that's going to be enrolled in in a kung fu class or, you know, on a soccer team. But even in those situations, I know, and I know Jamia is as well, we're very careful and cautious, and we observe the children and we observe their parents. And, you know, some people say that homeschoolers live in a bubble and their kids don't get a dose of reality, but really they do, because we do enroll them in different programs, interact with lots of children, and they're still very selective about the friends that they make in those, you know, in those programs. I hope I answered the question.
For me, first, I have 4, so they're always socializing at home first and foremost. And to piggyback off of Jania, I second that. Lots of sports. My kids have been in sports since the beginning of our homeschool journey. Church activities, they see those kids that they've grown up with and have known since birth. And sometimes we actually have to kind of fall back on the social activity so that we can make sure that we're getting the academics in. You can imagine with 4, and sometimes if they're not all doing the same sport, I'm here, my husband's there. Oh, well, what time is the game? There's 4 different games going on at the same time. We're interacting with those families and befriending them. And sometimes we have to fall back. I mean, what's happening now is really not what homeschooling, a reality of what homeschooling generally is. We're in isolation right now, which is a very different thing than what homeschooling really is. The kids get to go to co-ops and they learn with their peers. And the program that I've been doing since the beginning of our homeschool journey, my kids have 1 school day a week with a smaller group, like anywhere from maybe 6 to 10 other students. So, and now I'm teaching 7th grade. So they always have an opportunity to socialize with children as well as adults. And I venture even to say that maybe they get more practice with being able to interact with both and knowing how to do that more so, because we can give them those opportunities to meet the parents of these children. And you want to meet little Joey, well, go over and introduce yourself. Let's go over together, introduce ourselves, and then we get to know each other that way. And children seeing adults do that, they start to model that themselves. So they definitely get a lot of social interaction.
Thank you. And Jamia, you had just mentioned this. What is a co-op? Could you explain that for us?
Sure. So it's usually when other parents get together and they form classes. So for example, if I'm not strong in science, I may have a friend that is strong in science. So now, how about if you teach my children science, I'll teach your kids math. And then we might gather other kids and come together and have classes to where the strengths of the parents, they're now teaching a small group of children. And we kind of grow up in that.
Thank you. So say a parent decides to start homeschooling and they want to make sure that their child's learning is aligned with the state. What steps does a parent need to take to make sure that their child's homeschooling is counted with the state for when the child is ready to reintegrate into the school system, if that parent chooses to do that?
So I just wanted to back up real quick. So co-op is short for cooperative. I'm sure Jamia meant to say that for the last question. In terms of steps to make sure that you are adhering to the law, which I think is very important. I'm an attorney by training. So there are a couple things that you can do. Number one, there's an excellent organization called the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. It's HSLDA. They have a website. It's, you know, information is free. There's a membership on there, but the general information that you can get from that site is free. So you can go to the site and you can plug in your state, and it will tell you what the requirements are to homeschool in your state. Now, every state is a little bit different. So I know for DC, you know, you need to look at the Office of the State Superintendent for Education. Other states, you know, you may go through the Alabama State Department of Education. You might have to look at your county specific requirements, but generally there is a process. So you may have to contact those agencies or departments. There's usually a form that you're going to need to fill out to declare that you're homeschooling. There are usually requirements in terms of the number of hours or days that you actually have school, the required school time. And then every state is going to have their subjects, you know, what subjects you need to hit for each age group. And you also need to keep a portfolio of your work. Now, some states actually have someone that comes in to do homeschool reviews. Of course, with COVID, I think this last round of homeschool reviews were actually done via phone. Jamia can speak more to that than I can. But it's important to keep a portfolio of your children's work. So you keep work samples from every subject, from every year, for every grade. Those are the places that you should start. So HSLDA, your Office of State Superintendent, or you know, the State Department of Education, and then find out the particular county requirements. And it should be pretty clear there. But it's also important just to connect with other families that are homeschooling, because they're going to know, you know, what the laws are in your particular state. And also another resource is to join a cover school or an umbrella. So a cover school or an umbrella is really an organization, and they're run differently, but it's an organization that will help guide you through this process. You usually fill out, you know, some paperwork at the beginning of the school year to enroll. We are a part of a cover school here in the Alabama area. And so they keep all the transcripts. They create the transcripts. I send, you know, the grades to them. And so they keep all the records for me. And if there were any questions, you know, questions were to arise, I could ask for a copy of the transcript, but I still keep work samples of my children's work from every year. I have it going back to pre-K, and some people scan them, you know, and store them that way. I actually keep a lot of hard copies, and I also started scanning them too, just in case anything comes up.
Yeah, I think Jania covered it. I'll just add that in terms of when you go to be assessed by the county or state, usually they're not looking to like assess your student with how much they know. They're just looking to make sure that you have met the hours of instruction per week, per day. And so it's important that you date your work. Like, those are the types of things that they're looking for. They're not looking that your child is in, you know, XYZ math level for their age. They're not looking for that. And so in terms of high school, it kind of changes a little bit. Prior to high school, definitely keeping grades and keeping your own assessments. But in high school is where it really kind of gets serious, because unlike Jania, I'm not a part of a cover school. So I'm doing all the transcripts. I'm doing the descriptions of my daughter's classes myself. I'm starting to build a portfolio for her now to start to apply to colleges, because she'll be doing that like within the next month. And I'm keeping all of that. So I'm probably doing it a harder way. I know that to go through an umbrella, we do have a mom that just graduated 2 students. And when I was listening to her process, I was like, that sounds so much easier. But okay, I know once I do it once and I kind of have the process down, then I can just repeat it for the other 3 and, you know, update things as things change academically for whatever requirements. I know that they're talking, you know, some talk about what the SAT and the ACT, the requirements for that for college moving forward, that there's some talk that might change. So other than that, the process of me keeping transcripts and things, all of that will probably continue to be the same. So I keep track of all that.
Wow, thank you. I think the next question I'm going to ask is about something that's actually kept me teaching second grade, because I know that it comes up in third grade and above, and that's testing. Now, there has been some conversation about whether or not you're required to do testing in homeschool. So I want to know, one, is it required that they do, like, I don't know if there's like park or how that would work in the homeschool environment. So that I'll ask the second part after, like, is testing required, or what does that look like in a homeschool environment?
So I'll take a stab first. I will tell you what my experience has been, and it's a little dated because, as I indicated, we were enrolled in a public charter school, their online program. So when we were enrolled in that program, although my boys had school at home every day and I had all the materials, they were still required to go to the brick and mortar school to participate in the standardized testing, which I had no problem with at all. I think that it's very good for our children to get used to taking tests and to be very comfortable taking tests, because whether they like it or not, it's a reality, right? And it's a lot different when you're taking a test at home, you know, at the kitchen table, or, you know, somewhere comfy in your own home, where you're removed from that comfortable environment and you're going into a room with a bunch of other children. And so that's how we did it when we were enrolled in the online public charter school. But you also have the opportunity, and it varies, you know, by state, varies by county. But if you are homeschooling your children and you're not affiliated with a particular, you can reach out to the schools in your neighborhood and to your school and still request that your child is allowed to take the standardized test at that school, even though they're not enrolled in that school. Another way that we did it, once we moved to Alabama, one of the homeschool co-ops, the cooperatives that we were a part of, there are different organizations you can go through for standardized tests. So the moms were proctors, and we had to be certified. I was a proctor for one of the standardized tests. We had to, you know, prove that we had a college degree and whatever other requirements that they had. And we actually proctored, you know, the standardized tests ourselves for our children. We mailed them in, and we got the, you know, we got the results back. I do think, again, that standardized testing is an important skill for children to learn and to be comfortable with, because I have witnessed and been in contact with homeschoolers who were terrified of standardized tests, and they had testing anxiety. And I think that's because it wasn't made a part of their regular schooling at home, and I didn't want that for my children, so it hasn't been a problem with them, and they've always scored pretty well.
Pretty much the same for me. With our oldest, she began standardized testing with our local elementary school, where I just had to call, find out the dates, and then get her on the roster to be able to take the test. It was the same with the PSAT. She was able to take the PSAT with the local high school. And it was the same with the ACT, and she didn't get a chance to take the SAT, so because it was canceled because of COVID. But in terms of the testing, it's actually not mandatory for the state of Maryland that the child is tested. I think that it's a good idea as well. I second that with about what Jania said. I do know that there are some parents who assess in different ways. They may assess not with like a written test. It might be assessed through discussion or things like that, and then they might test every few years. I do know families that do that. It really is what you decide to do, what's best for your child, but assessment is always an important part of academics, to be sure that they are getting what they need and that you are filling in any gaps where they need to be strengthened in. And so I'm a firm believer in assessment.
And in terms of standardized assessments, in both of your experience and opinions, when do you think is a good age to start doing standardized assessments? Like, I know in my school, for example, we start in third grade. Do you think that's too young? Do you think that's the appropriate age? When do you think would be a good age to start doing those assessments for your children?
That's a good question. I think that as early as kindergarten, children should experience kind of incremental assessments. I mean, we do that informally anyway. When we sit down with our children, you know, we ask them questions about the colors or their letters. Those are very informal. Just, it's really teaching, but you're also assessing what they know. I think third grade is appropriate. I guess I never really considered that question or thought about it too much because they were testing, you know, at least from first grade up. Back then, when I say back then, I mean, I guess, I don't know what year that was. I have to figure it out. Maybe 2009, you know, they were participating in tests or, you know, actually doing standardized tests. So I think third grade is appropriate. I think third grade might be a little bit late to introduce your children to the concept of, okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to take this like a test, maybe not a standardized test, but just a test in general, and explain to them what that process is about, because I wouldn't want them to have anxiety over it. I would want it to be like a natural flow, like this is a natural part of the educational process, and this is just an extension of what you've done in the classroom. So I think how it's explained to the children makes a difference too.
I will say that I do have one of those children that have test anxiety, and she's been tested since kindergarten. And I think it just has to do with her anxiety and the way that she processes having now to be tested on information. She tends to still score well, but it doesn't mean that she doesn't go through kind of a whole process in her mind of anxiety in order to take it. And it's been that way consistently, and she has been testing for a long time. With my other three, I started the standardized testing at third grade, but we did testing at home. I would do timed tests at home, but third grade is when we would now go to a school and do it with a school.
Okay, thank you. And both of you had mentioned previously that before you started homeschooling your children, you both had separate careers that were not related to the field of education. So for a parent who's starting out and who might be worried about, like, you know, I've never taught, or I didn't see myself being a first, second, third grade, fifth grade, high school teacher, like, does the homeschooling, is there a curriculum that they're provided, or are they expected to make up their own lessons? How did you all go about navigating that aspect of teaching?
So for me, I was very eclectic in the beginning, and yeah, I worked at a large law firm for a couple of years, and then had a law practice from home in preparation to start our family, and continued to do that for a few years afterwards. So just a note for parents: you can work, you can be an entrepreneur and still home educate your children. But I guess initially, for me, like I said, I was very eclectic. So I pulled from a bunch of different resources. I created file folder games. I, you know, created worksheets. We watched Sesame Street. I mean, you know, I kept it simple when they were really, really little. I didn't run out and, you know, invest and buy a whole bunch of books. I didn't invest in a lot of, you know, different curricula because they were small and I was trying to figure it out, you know, as I went on. But I am very type A, and I try to be very structured. So I did get to a point, I see Jamia shaking her head like, yeah. I did get to a point where I wanted to have actually like a boxed curriculum. And I think it's fine if that works for your family. And in a boxed curriculum, everything in that box may not work. But to simplify things, I think it's good to get information from different people about writing programs, or, you know, for grammar or for math, and truly understanding what type of learner your child is. Are they visual? You know, are they auditory? So that can shape and help you pick out the curriculum that's most important for you. But you can do this, and you may buy something and you try it and it doesn't work. I think I have things on my shelf here that's still in the wrapper. Like, I just decided we weren't going to use it, and you can sell that quickly, you know, to someone else. So I think that it's very overwhelming though, selecting a curriculum, because there's so much out there. And so I think when you dive in, you do a little research and you talk to people, and I'm thankful that even, you know, talk to parents in the DC area, parents of Kids and Culture Camp, reach out and we talk about where they are with their children and what their children's strengths and weaknesses and how they learn. And then I can share with them what's worked for us. So you can buy box curriculum, or you can buy something, get your math lessons from Saxon Math and get your writing from Institute of Excellence in Writing, and some of your reading materials from Fountas and Pinnell. You can kind of pick and choose what you want. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You just keep it moving and find something else.
I think for me, when I first started, I was super blessed. My mother-in-law was a bilingual kindergarten / first grade teacher. So she had binders and binders of work in all different subject areas that she just gifted to me. It was like, well, you're gonna homeschool my first grandbaby here. She gave me all this stuff. Now, she wasn't exactly supportive of me homeschooling initially, because she was a teacher. She was very much, you need to send my grandbaby to school. Keep her in school. I don't know what you're doing, but here, take all this stuff since you decided that this is what you're going to do. So the first year, it really was just trial and error. What worked, what didn't work. And as soon as I made up my mind to not try to recreate the school day, because I think in my mind, that's initially what I was trying to do, and I made it more difficult for myself. As soon as I figured out that there's something about quality versus quantity, then I think the journey got a little bit easier. I didn't need to educate her for 6 hours. Like, she could get a concept in 15 or 20 minutes. We do some practice work, and then we continue to maybe touch and go throughout the day so that it sticks. And that could take, at that age, 3 hours. And then we can go play and do other things where they need to learn how to use their fine motor skills, or they need to get physical education, so that I'm not trying to recreate a traditional school day. I think that I answered your question.
That's great. And that actually leads to my next question. So do you all believe that there should be like a designated amount of time you should stay on one concept, or is it more based on where your child is in regard to that concept?
I think it's the latter. It's based upon where your child is, and how quickly, some subject matter, some concepts, they're just going to grasp very quickly and you can move on, and others, you might spend 2 hours. I remember one, and I think I journaled about this, but one school day, I was down here in the basement with Christian working on math, and I think we must have worked on that math. I don't know, it was 5 o'clock when we finished all of his schoolwork. And I know we spent a long time on that math. Now, see, math is not my strong point. So I might not have been explaining the concepts and, explaining how to work the problems out, in the best way. So I just remember him running up the stairs and we were done with school saying, I'm free, I'm free, I'm free at last. So, I mean, there's some things that they can get through very quickly that's not going to take very long. And then other things you might need to spend a little more time on, and you might need to break that time up. And I think that's fine. I think that's one of the beauties of homeschooling, home educating your children. Again, you can move quickly through things, or you can take your time through things. And I think it's needed. It depends on the subject matter. And I might not be the best teacher for my child for that particular subject. And as a matter of fact, once they hit 4th or 5th grade math, I passed that on to my husband because that wasn't my strong point. But I did not want my weaknesses to become a weakness of my children. So I always made sure that any area that I wasn't completely comfortable in, I had someone else that could help them, either teach them, explain it to them, or bring them in, have a private tutor come in, or, whomever. So I hope I answered that.
Yeah, for me, we kind of have the one room schoolhouse going on here. It's interesting to watch the twins have school because they individually have strengths and weaknesses. And so for me to spend time on one particular subject area for one, they move together. And it's only because I have 4 and I'm also directing this 7th grade program, and I don't always have a lot of time to spend the individual time with them for certain subjects. And so I will have the other one do more practice work in that particular area while I'm working with the other one. Also, my two older kids, they also do things with the two younger kids. Or I'll have our oldest, she does things with all three of them, so that we truly are like the one room schoolhouse where everybody is learning. The kids enjoy learning from their older sister, and they enjoy doing that together. I know before the twins even started school, they were so anxious to play school and get their little papers and pencils because they would see their big brother and big sister doing school. And so even just role playing like that, it got them excited about starting academics. So it was really easy to kind of transition them into that.
So then how do you know if your child fully understands or grasps a concept?
Through assessments, through talking to them, through reviewing their work. I think sometimes, and I know I've been guilty of this, you give your child an assignment and then you don't review it. It's like, here, do this. So to me, that becomes busy work, because if we're asking them to do some work and we don't even take the time to actually review it, we're not doing our jobs that we're supposed to do as educators of our children. So, really just reviewing their work carefully. And if you're using a particular curriculum, you're going to have an answer key. So it's not like we have to sit there and try to figure out the answers too. You have the answer key. You're looking to see whether the answers are right. You're looking through to see how they actually worked a particular problem out, if they followed the right steps. So you're seeing that up close and personal on a daily basis. So you can do like a formal assessment, but you're seeing whether they're grasping the concepts on a daily basis, because you're building on those concepts. And they're not going to be able to really have that, you need that foundation in order to build on that. And you're going to see whether they're not able to do that. And I would say too, with mine being in 10th and 7th grade now, I'm not their primary teacher. Like, I'm not the one that's introducing all of the new concepts. We participate in a homeschool group, in a homeschool program where they have, 4 or 5 different instructors. And I think that's great, because at a certain point, I don't want to be the only one that's reviewing their work and giving them grades. I want them to get used to being accountable to someone else also, because I think that creates another level of responsibility and independence. And you want your children to be independent thinkers and learners and to be able to do things on their own. So last year, when was the first year for all of his classes except for one, that my oldest took classes outside of the home, and someone else was grading his work. I reviewed it, I proofed his papers, I sat down and would work with him if he was struggling, with particular concepts. But he had deadlines to meet. I'm probably getting off topic, I'm sorry, Imani. He had deadlines to meet. If his paper was late, wasn't in pass for mom, the paper was late and there was a point deduction. If he forgot to turn in an assignment, he got a 0. And I think that at a certain point, homeschoolers need to experience that, because that's going to prepare them for college. If you're always turning your work into mom, and mom isn't going to kind of, throw that hammer down, I don't think that truly prepares you in the way that you need to be prepared, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same for me. With our oldest, I always thought that she was a really gifted writer, but I always knew I need someone else to put eyes on her writing, and I need her to be able to accept a critique so that she can continue to grow in her writing. And so I think in the 10th grade is when we started the dual enrollment, to where now she did have deadlines, and her professor was looking at her writing and giving her feedback of things that she had to work on, and having to revise and revise again and revise again. Now, let her get that direction from me. It is certainly not the same as her getting it from a professor. And she is just continuing to grow. So I plan to do the same things with the other 3. I love writing. That's my passion, writing. And so I will take them to a certain point. And then after that, like, I need someone else to put eyes on their writing so that they can grow. And in terms of assessment with the twins and with Juan, right now I'm teaching them grammar. Grammar, diagramming, all that is my thing. I love language. And so, for example, with the twins, I'm teaching them verbs right now. So instead of doing a lot of worksheets, like I'll have them, I printed out some old school books, and they have to, as they're reading these books, they have to go through and circle the verbs, circle linking verbs, circle action transitive verbs, circle helping verbs, and then they have to write what kind of verb it is over top of it, and then I'll check that. So that review of their work is like so key, because then I can catch things and go back, and now we can kind of polish up what they didn't understand, and it could still be, I try to assess in ways that are fun so that it's still, they're excited to learn and to kind of reinvest in understanding the information. And if I have to take alone time with them, I will. And I'll usually do that in the morning when no one else is there, because they still are like, well, how come, with the twins especially, they're very competitive. So I don't want to have to stop and work on this because I get it. And no, baby, you don't get it. And mommy and I will work on it tomorrow when this one is not awake yet. So I'll try to spend that extra time with them so that I can bring them up together and continue to teach at a way that's convenient for my schedule.
Imani, Jamia, can you go ahead and just explain what dual enrollment is? Because you threw that out there, and just to make sure everybody understands.
Okay, so dual enrollment, not to be, I forget, concurrent enrollment and dual enrollment are two different things, which I'm actually not real sure with concurrent enrollment. But dual enrollment is when your child is in a high school program and they will get two different credits. They'll get a credit for high school and they'll also get a credit for college. So you as the parent will grade them as a high schooler, but then they will also turn in their work and then they'll get the college credit. And at the end of the course, they'll gain the 3 credits for the class. And so we've done that with history. Yeah, our oldest loves history and writing. So we've done that with history, and we've done it with a writing course. And now she has to write a dissertation for her senior year. So she will also be in a college course at the same time to meet all her deadlines and all the things that she has to do for that.
Oh, wow. Oh, thank you. So when I'm thinking about myself as an educator, as a teacher, one area that's always been like a stickler for me is the area of like levels. Like, so my school, we use Fontes and Pinnell, and a lot of times I've had to have discussions with my students about like, yes, this is your reading level, but you were not a letter. Like, your friends and you have different levels, but you're not a letter. I don't want you to like feel value in reading on level K, L, M. How do you all deal with levels, and how do you deal with like making sure your child is on grade level? Like, do you talk to them? You're like, well, now you're almost done with 3rd grade. Now you're going to be a 4th grader. Or is it more about like, look at all the stuff that you've learned? Like, how does that conversation work in the homeschool environment?
So I kind of smile at this one because I don't think our boys truly knew what grades they were in until, I don't know, maybe like 5th grade or something. And they still like, someone would ask them, so what grade are you in? And you can kind of tell homeschoolers when someone asks them what grade they're in and they look at their parents like, what am I supposed to say? Because honestly, we wouldn't kind of say, we wouldn't emphasize like, you're in the 2nd grade, you're in the 1st grade, you're 3rd grade, 5th grade, you're at this level, you're at that level. I mean, it might be mentioned once or twice. Of course, they're older now, 7th and 10th grade, so they definitely know it. But it was never, it's usually not really emphasized. And then I guess in terms of, the levels for reading and just the grades, I know some homeschoolers, their children may be at, 5th grade math, but they may be doing 7th grade, language arts. It really just depends on where they are at that time and how the parents choose to structure, their schooling. And determining whether your children are on grade level is really very, it's subjective and objective. I mean, obviously, but it really just depends on where they are, you know, in their educational journey. My oldest has taken Latin. He took Latin through a homeschool co-op, and now he's taking Latin. He's doing dual enrollment classes too, as Jamia talked about. He's taking 3 dual enrollment classes, and he's taking Latin at the university level, but he also took Latin last year. So I don't know where I would say what level he is on in Latin, you know, if he's level 1, level 2. So it really just depends. And I guess we don't really get I'm going to say caught up in it. You know where your child is, and any curriculum that you purchase, you're going to purchase it based upon a level, you know, whether it's 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade or level A, B, C. I know one curriculum that I used, they did it by colors, because they didn't want children to feel like they were behind if they were, you know, level 6, and they think that they should be at level 8. So they use colors. So I don't know if that answered the question, but you know where your children are. Your children may not know exactly, you know, exactly what level, and there might be mixed levels. And we use that and accelerate them, or just spend the time that we need to get them where we think they should be, you know, based upon traditional ages and grades, because we still have to use that as a standard. It's still a standard that's used. And so we do use that, but I guess we don't put a lot of emphasis on it.
Right, I would agree. The only time that it's really necessary for you to have to pigeonhole them in a level is when you go for your assessment for the county, or if you're applying for certain programs where they need to know a grade level. And it just depends, like when our son, our 11-year-old did the Maryland, University of Maryland instrument thing that was free, he had to be at least in the 4th grade. So they didn't have the ages, they had the grade levels. So I had to say, okay, well, yeah, he's in the 4th grade. And I called to see if there was an age requirement to make sure that he met everything. And so that's really the only time that we have to use levels. But like Jania said, because it's mixed in all the different subject areas, I mean, that is the beauty of homeschooling. Like, they're not pigeonholed into one level. They excel where they can, and then they come up to grade level where they need to, and then can still accelerate them so that they surpass that. It's just kind of whatever your student is doing.
That's awesome. And so for my final question, it's a 2-part question. The first part is, what is your favorite thing about homeschooling? And then the second part is, what advice would you give to new parents who are starting their homeschooling journey?
So I think my favorite part about homeschooling is just being able to be there for those important moments. I mean, to have taught my children to read and to write, and, you know, even some different languages when we were trying to study foreign languages, seeing their growth and being there, you know, for those moments is priceless. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade my legal job, the money, none of it. I would not trade it. It's just being there, being present, and seeing those very, very special moments. And I have a room of, you know, almost 15 years of home education books and supplies and manipulatives and posters. And, you know, I'm giving that stuff away and looking through things, and, you know, remembering like the schedules that I put together for the boys when they were 3 and 5 years old and 6 years old, and they had a little card that said, you know, review with dad. So they would look forward for when their dad came home so they could review with him and share with them everything that they learned, you know, during that day or that week. So I think those moments are just, they're priceless. And I also really, really, really appreciate being able to incorporate Bible into every aspect of our homeschool. We did that a lot when they were little. You know, they're in the higher grades, so not so much now, but I remember their spelling words. Like, they learned to spell all the books of the Bible. That was part of their, you know, spelling requirements. So I really appreciate that aspect. And then the second part of your question is, what advice would we give to parents that are homeschooling? take a deep breath. You're not going to figure it out, in 1 week, 2 weeks. You might not even figure it out, what really, really works throughout the course of a whole year. Things change, your children change, your schedules change, the needs of your family change. So my biggest advice, I guess, 3 things. 1, be flexible. Be very, very flexible. Make sure that you allow yourself breaks and time to plan. So I would definitely at the beginning of the week or on the weekend spend at least 2 hours planning out our week, our homeschool week, the work that the kids were going to do, our field trips, whatever activities. Carve out that time. If you're married and your spouse can kind of take the kids away so you have those 2 hours and do that. If not, wake up early or stay up late, so that you can plan. Make sure that you carve out time for yourself. And then also assess how you are doing. And I'm not talking about testing, assess how you are doing and assess how your children are doing. Ask them, how are you feeling? Are you enjoying this? What do you think about this book? Do you like it? Do you not like? I always try to get a feel of how my children are doing, because making sure, and this is something that I just believe in truly, and I know Jamia does too, and this is one of the hearts also of our program that we love, Kids and Culture Camp. We want to make sure our children love the process of learning, and they're not going to love learning if it becomes a chore to them, or it's something that they don't look forward to in the morning. So make learning fun as much as possible. Have things for your children to look forward to. Popsicle Fridays, game day Wednesdays, have school on the lawn Tuesdays, just do things that are fun, while you're incorporating the educational aspect too. But those are the main things I would say. And definitely reach out to those that have been doing this for a long time, because you know what? We're here to help. I know I am. I know Jamia is. And I know most homeschoolers that have been doing this for a while. We understand where parents are in the new journey, and we're happy to share the information and knowledge that we have with you in any way that we can.
Okay, I think my favorite part is just being with them. I got to experience my oldest being in school and away from me for 5 to 6 hours a day, and the impact that had on just our relationship. And it changed when I had her home with me and we were able to do more things. And children, especially when they get into the teen years, if you haven't cultivated a good communication with your child, by the time they get into the teen years, it could be brutal. So it's a cultivation that has to start when they are very, very young. And I can say for our family, homeschooling has definitely helped me to cultivate, helped my husband and I to cultivate a very good communication with her that now has transcended the teen years. Not to say that we don't have our issues, because we have them, but it's so helpful that she feels that she can talk to us, and hopefully the other 3 will follow suit. And I would say the biggest advice is not to compare. Like, I'm not type A. So initially when I walked into Jania's space, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not this kind of homeschool parent. And so then I was kind of beating myself up of what I should be doing, or should I be doing this? And I quickly learned that, you know what, those are her strengths. What are my strengths that I can give to my children that they will enjoy? And so not comparing is huge, because then once you start to compare, then you feel like you're less than, and then you might not do your best for your kids. And the second advice I would give is just the patience. Like, you have to be patient with yourself. It's a journey. And it's also a character journey. It's a character journey for you as the parent, and it's a character journey for your children. And your children are watching you. So it's important that you model what you want to see in your kids. Will it always come about quickly? No, but if you're consistent with it, you can always fall back when you're having these great discussions, and you can fall back on whatever the consistency has been so that they know that they have always seen that from you, because your kids will pick up on your weaknesses and your strengths. So if you know that you have some issues in your character and you start to see them in your kids, then it's like holding up a mirror to yourself to say, oh, I know that they got that from me. I need to tighten that up right there. You know, so, and it also makes for really good discussion to speak about things that are not just academics. Like Jania said, we're shaping the hearts of our kids. And so we get to talk to them about all types of things, like who introduced our kids to the things that are introduced to in school, like as early as second grade. Like we can take our time with introducing those things to them in a timely manner where they'll understand, and where we can also reference scripture, and we can reference, just answer all of their questions, and they not be embarrassed and ashamed to ask things, and really customize it for them. And so knowing that she's leaving us next year, like it's bittersweet because I'm ready for her to go and spread her wings. But, you know, I'm going to miss her. I've been with her for a long time, and that's our firstborn. Okay, I don't want to cry because we're getting close to that time, right? And that's my firstborn. And I love the woman that she is becoming. And to continue when they get older, you have to allow them to make some mistakes, because that's also part of the education, and that's how they learn. And I'm still learning who I am to my kids, and my kids are learning who they are. And I really appreciate being with them in that way.
Imani, can I add one more thing? Particularly for parents who their children are enrolled in a traditional school, and you know you're at home with your children now, you know, doing virtual learning, still enrolled in a traditional school setting, but doing virtual learning. Your children are used to a schedule. And even though I homeschool, my children are used to a schedule. I know there are unschoolers out there that just, you know, whatever goes kind of goes. And I know that's probably not a fair definition, so don't take it personally. But our children, particularly if they are enrolled in a traditional school setting, they are used to schedules. So guess what you need to do at home? You need to have a schedule. And I'm sure the schools have put out, you know, certain times where you're going to need to be online, or the teacher may have office hours, things like that. But outside of that, that's part of your schedule. Make your whole schedule for the whole week, you know, your schedule by the day. Have a visual representation of that schedule up, so your children know, I'm gonna, you know, see Ms. B. I'm gonna have this, you know, class with Ms. B from 10 to 10:30, and then, you know, we're gonna have time from 10:45 to 11:15. So I mean, it's helpful for them to know what's next, and for me anyway, it's helpful to help me stay organized and to have a routine. So when they get up in the morning, if they were you know, going to the school building every day, that's what they were used to. They knew what was next. And now that they're at home, they still need to know what's next. They need to know what's happening from the time they wake up until, you know, lunchtime, dinner time, or whatever. And I know everyone doesn't follow like a schedule, but for those whose children are in traditional school, it's helpful to have that, and to have that visual representation, even for the little ones, kindergarten, first, second grade, have that visual representation for them. It's very helpful.
Thank you. I want to take the second to thank you both for taking this time to meet and talk with me. I got a lot of great insight about homeschooling. I want to let you both know that I have so much respect for both of you. I admire you both so much, and I find your children to be wonderful. For all parents who are watching this, whether you decide to homeschool, whether you're doing traditional schooling, whatever you're deciding, that's your decision, and I respect and honor you all as well, because you're doing the best that you can for your children in these unprecedented times. We don't know what's going on. We're in a very, very tricky space, and the best that we can do is just be there for our children. So thank you all so much. This is Tea with Miss B. Bye.